work like three legs of a stool. They lift and support nations as they reach for higher standards of progress and prosperity. Now, I would be the first to admit that no democracy is perfect. In fact, our founders were smart enough to enshrine in our founding documents the idea that we had to keep moving toward a more perfect union. Because after all, democracies rely on the wisdom and judgment of flawed human beings. But real democracies recognize the necessity of each side of that three-legged stool. And democracies that strengthen these three segments of society can deliver extraordinary results for their people. Today, I'd like to focus on one leg of that stool, civil society. Now, markets and politics usually receive more attention, but civil society is every bit as important, and it undergirds both democratic governance and broad-based prosperity. Poland actually is a case study in how a vibrant civil society can produce progress. The heroes of the Solidarity movement, people like Geremik and Lech Walesa and Adam Michnik and millions of others, laid the foundation for the Poland we see today. They knew that the Polish people desired and deserved more from their country, and they transformed that knowledge into one of history's greatest movements for positive change. Now, not every nation has a civil society movement on the scale of Solidarity, but most countries do have a collection of activists, organizations, congregations, writers, and reporters that work through peaceful means to encourage governments to do better by their own people. Not all of these organizations or individuals are equally effective, of course, and they do represent a broad range of opinions. And having been both in an NGO and led NGOs and been in government, I know that it's sometimes tough to deal with NGOs when you're in the government. But it doesn't matter whether the goal is better laws or lower crime or cleaner air or social justice or consumer protection or entrepreneurship and innovation. Societies move forward when the citizens that make up these groups are empowered to transform common interests into common actions that serve the common good. As we meet here on the eve of our American 4th of July celebrations, the day when we commemorate our independence, I want to say a word about why the issue of civil society is so important to Americans. Our independence was a product of our civil society. Our civil society was pre-political. And it was only through debate, discussion, and civic activism that the United States of America came into being. We were a people before we were a nation. And civil society not only helped create our nation, it helps sustain and power our nation into the future. It was representatives of civil society who were the first to recognize that the American colonies could not continue without democratic governance. And after we won our independence, it was activists who helped establish our democracy. And they quickly recognized that they were part of a broader struggle for human rights, human dignity, human progress. Civil society has played an essential role in identifying and eradicating the injustices that have, throughout our history, separated our nation from the principles on which it was founded. It was civil society, after all, that gave us the abolitionists who fought the evils of slavery, the suffragettes who campaigned for women's rights, the freedom marchers who demanded racial equality, the unions that championed the rights of labor, the conservationists who worked to protect our planet and climate. I did begin my professional life in civil society. The NGO I worked for, the Children's Defense Fund, helped expand educational opportunities for poor children and children with disabilities, and tried to address the challenges faced by young people in prison. Now, I would be the first to say that our work did not transform our nation or remake our government overnight. But when that kind of activism is multiplied across an entire country through the work of hundreds, even thousands of NGOs, it does produce real and lasting positive change. So a commitment to strengthening civil society has been one of my constants throughout my public career as First Lady, Senator, and now Secretary of State. I was able to work with Slovakian NGOs that stood up to and ultimately helped bring down an authoritarian government. I've seen civil society groups in India bring the benefits of economic empowerment to the most marginalized women in that society. I've watched in wonder as a small group of women activists in South Africa began with nothing and went on to build a community of 50,000 homes. President Obama shares this commitment. In his case, it led him to become a community organizer in Chicago. Both of us joined in the work of civil society because we believe that when citizens nudge leaders in the right direction, our country grows stronger. The greatness of the United States depends on our willingness to seek out and set right the areas where we fall short. For us, and for every country, civil society is essential to political and economic progress. Even in the most challenging environments, civil society can help improve lives and empower citizens. In fact, I want to recognize two women activists who are with us today from Afghanistan and Iraq. If Faiza Babakan and Afifa Azim would stand up, I would just like to thank you for your courage and your willingness to be here. Now, it may seem to some of us like a very nice, but perhaps not essential presence to have just one woman from each country be here, but I can speak from personal experience that just as the civil society is essential to democracy, women are essential to civil society. And these women speak for so many who have never had a chance to have their voices heard. So along with well-functioning markets and responsible, accountable government, progress in the 21st century depends on the ability of individuals to coalesce around shared goals and harness the power of their convictions. But when governments crack down on the right of citizens to work together, as they have throughout history, societies fall into stagnation and decay. North Korea, a country that cannot even feed its own people, has banned all civil society. In Cuba and Belarus, as Radek said, civil society operates under extreme pressure. And the government of Iran has turned its back on a rich tradition of civil society, perpetrating human rights abuses against many activists and ordinary citizens who just wanted the right to be heard. There's also a broader group of countries where the walls are closing in on civic organizations. Over the last 6 years, 50 governments have issued new restrictions against NGOs. And the list of countries where civil society faces resistance is growing longer. In Zimbabwe and the Democratic Republic of Congo, physical violence directed against individual activists has been used to intimidate and silence entire sectors of civil society. Last year, Ethiopia imposed a series of strict new rules on NGOs, and very few groups have been able to re-register under this new framework, particularly organizations working on sensitive issues like human rights. The Middle East and North Africa are home to a diverse collection of civil society groups, but too many governments in the region still resort to intimidation, questionable legal practices,